During this pandemic, Canadians who work in the U.S. contend with a web of rules. And as Southwestern Ontario Hub journalist Mary Baxter discovered, it can make crossing the border confusing and even risky. She joins us now in London, Ontario to explain. Let's maybe start by clearing up the confusion about crossing the border. When we talk about self isolation and physically crossing the border, what do people need to know?
Well, there's been a lot of different rules since borders closed to essentially non-essential traffic in March 2020. The most recent ones were introduced in February, and they have to do with quarantining and also with testing. So people who cross a land border, for instance, have to test, and I'm talking about between Canada and the United States here. They have to test in advance of crossing the border. It's, I think, roughly around 72 hours. Then they have to do another test when they're at the border, and they also have to quarantine for 14 days, which they can do at home. But during that time, on day 8, they have to take another test. They have it easy. In terms of if you're arriving at the airport, you also have to do that first part of your quarantine as a hotel stay.
Now, maybe it's important that we maybe start talking about what the border looked like before the pandemic, which seems like a long time away, a long time ago. What was that process like for people who worked on either side of the border?
So people who worked on either side of the border often would use something called a Nexus card, and it's a streamlining of the border crossing process. So they actually have to go and get an interview in order to apply for this card, and it's a joint program between Canada and the United States. It's meant for low-risk travelers, and they can use the card to, when they get to the border, to use a special lane, and they flash their card at an RFID reader, and then they're on their way. There may be a few questions from the Border Services Guard, but that's really about it. Now, for many of these workers, they under the new rules, their work is declared essential work. So it's a little bit different from being an essential worker. If we say that, we might think of somebody who is, for instance, an ambulance driver or something. But doing essential work in terms of cross-border work means anything from doing trucking to working in a hospital to working in construction, for instance. So now the way that it works for them, or the way it's supposed to, is that they actually have an exemption from the quarantines and the testing if they can prove that they do essential work. And there's a few rules that are involved in that. One, there's certain lists of different kinds of work that would qualify, and then also there's a requirement that their pattern of travel has to be regular. You know, they're crossing perhaps a few times a week or every week, that sort of thing.
I want to pick up on that. Is there a distinction about procedures for those crossing the border once or twice a month, or frequently as once a week, or even daily?
So this is one of the areas where there's an issue has definitely arisen. I've been told by a Windsor lawyer who specializes in border issues and in immigration. So, for instance, there was a contractor not too long ago in February who had to go down to the States to monitor a project that his company was doing, and when he came back, he was told that his work was non-essential because he was actually traveling maybe a couple of times a month. And so it didn't really meet that regular pattern of travel. And when he refused to do either the testing or the quarantine, he was actually fined nearly $4,000.
I want to actually pick up on the other people that you spoke to, including a healthcare worker. What did they have to say about crossing the border regularly?
Well, this uncertainty at the border, there's so much uncertainty about when are you going to be stopped? Are you going to be considered to be doing essential work? And it's creating a lot of anxiety. So, for instance, one nurse that I interviewed, she'd started a new job. She'd picked up a job in Dearborn, Michigan, and she had to go over and do her paperwork and fill that out before starting the job. When she got back to the border guard said to her, "Well, that was a non-essential trips. So you're going to have to test and quarantine. So she did test and quarantine, but that also meant that she actually missed her second COVID vaccination shot for COVID-19 because she couldn't go out of the house except the border. She was told at the border she could go to work. It was a very strange situation.
Lots of confusion there. I'm curious, are
Mhm.
there any solutions to help clear that up a bit?
So there all through this process, there have been challenges and issues, and the federal government has used something called an order in council to clarify some of these questions as they arise through the Quarantine Act legislation. So what this does is that this gives greater direction to the border guards who are the ones on the ground who are actually making the decisions. So that's kind of expected to be what will happen in this situation. When I asked the federal government about this, the Canadian Border Services Agency, they were already talking about how that regular pattern of travel could be not only just like daily or weekly, but there could be instances of how traveling at a couple of times a month. But they're advising people to just make sure that they've got documentation to show that they're an essential worker. So that might be something like a letter from an employer that describes the frequency and the pattern of travel.
Now, there's been a lot of focus on the high case counts in this province, but also in the state of Michigan. What are the risks when crossing the border for employment?
Well, right now in Michigan, Michigan is actually the hot spot in the U.S. There's just an eruption of cases, and you would think with that being the case, these cross border workers would be concerned, but they tell me many of them tell me they actually feel safer in the states. There's a couple of reasons why they feel like the states has actually responded to situations faster. Most of the nurses I talked to, for instance, were vaccinated and were vaccinated in the United States. They've been vaccinated far ahead of nursing staff here in Ontario. They had access to personal protective equipment to do their job, and also they're simply going back and forth between their jobs and Canada. It's not like they're stopping along the way.
Mary Baxter, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight, and we'll see you again at another time.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.